Georgia?
I'm very good, thank you. Very good. Looking forward to my first LinkedIn Live. So yeah, thank you for inviting me.
It is very exciting. I've been doing LinkedIn Lives now for the last few months with various different people, and I think this is an absolutely a brilliant day to be doing a live session, particularly with you, Georgia, because you're so passionate about this topic. And I know it's 50 years of Earth Day today, which
yes, it is. It's incredible,
incredible.
Isn't it? Yeah. So the original Earth Day was, at the time, I think, the largest civil movement uprising in history. Was 2 million people took to the streets to protest about environmental issues, and it was the movement that started the legislation to start banning DDT, which was this awful bioaccumulating toxin, pesticide. So yeah, it's a really sort of landmark event, and it's something that's repeated every year in April, and this is the 50th anniversary of it. So cool.
Absolutely incredible. Okay, what I want to do is, before we carry on into this session, I have had so many questions submitted to me overnight to ask you and to get your expertise on. But before we do all of that, I want to let people know exactly who you are, what you've been up to, what your business is, and all the niceties of that, just so people know exactly who we're talking to. Whoever's watching now, I'm Kirsty Angerer. I'm the traveling ergonomist. If many of you have been following me for the last couple of years, I've had my ergonomics business now for just over 2.5 years, and my passion is to help people within workplaces with their ergonomics, health and well-being. And I know certainly Georgia aligns herself very much with the health and well-being industry as well as sustainability and in the environmental things. But this is such a good bio that I had to read it out for everybody because it's incredible and interesting, and I want to delve into it even further. So welcome everyone. We've got Georgia with us today, Georgia Elliott-Smith. And I just want to let you know about Georgia and what she's all about. So Georgia's an environmental engineer and chartered environmentalist. She started her career at Bovis in 1995 as one of the first environment managers in the UK construction industry. In 1997, following an expedition to Antarctica, she became a UN Special Junior Envoy for Youth and the Environment, and a role that involves speaking to thousands of young people around the world on environmental issues. Since establishing sustainability consultancy Element 4 in 2003, Georgia has worked with organisations such as Bank of England, Nike, Lancet, Deloitte, Accenture, Mace to deliver more sustainable projects and business practices. A critic of traditional approaches to environmental management, which we'll delve into, Georgia has developed an approach she calls disruptive sustainability, dumping the KPIs, cutting out the bland reports, and making sustainability everyone's job. This is amazing, Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you.
What was an expedition in Antarctica like?
Oh, it was incredible. I was 21 at the time. It sounds completely made up story, but I was sponsored by Bovis at the time, the construction company, and they had every year, several times a year, they had these conferences where you get together and you did all this training and stuff. And at one of those, there was a speaker called Robert Swan, who was an explorer. And he came to kind of give this motivational talk and tell us about what he was doing with these expeditions. And I had just read a book that he had written some time before, and was just really starry-eyed, like, oh my God, it's Robert Swan. So after he finished speaking, I just went up and did what I usually do, which is just stride up to people and go, hi, nice to meet you, I'm Georgia. And we got chatting and we got on really well. And it turned out, after the conversation, he was looking for people to join an expedition that he was planning. And so he came to visit me. I was at University in Portsmouth at the time. He came to visit me. We had a cup of coffee. We planned this all out. And 6 months later, I had to, go on this mad dash trying to raise money to participate. And 6 months later, I was on the ice in Antarctica. And so it was completely crazy period of my life. Completely amazing, really eye-opening being on the ice, part of this expedition in Antarctica. Learned so much, and as the expedition was sponsored by UNESCO, so a division of the United Nations, and as a result of participating in that expedition, I became a UNESCO Special Envoy for Youth and the Environment. So that then was the sort of larger part of the story, which was then traveling all over the place, speaking to young people about environmental issues and trying to raise awareness about, all the things that subsequently become my career. So yeah, it was brilliant.
I mean, what a highlight of a career that is. I'm very jealous.
It was wonderful. It was incredible. And I can, and I look back and I can hardly believe it was me there. And funnily enough, I was going through the loft the other day. So in the midst of all this COVID lockdown, I've been doing a lot of clearing out, and I was going through the loft and I found a big plastic bag stuffed full of photographs. I mean, remember those? Actual photographs, and film, like strips of film, and slides, slides to go in a projector.
Yeah.
And that was my pack that I took around with me, doing projection slideshows. I mean, God, that shows how old I am, sorry. Young people out there, but giving slideshows with all these photographs of me in Antarctica with all these explorers and incredible, fascinating people, and all the technology. We had this computer that was set up. Everything at the base camp was buried under the ice during the winter months, and then it was in the summer we flew over there and set up camps. We had to dig everything out from underneath the ice, including an airplane, which they take the wings off and they bury it under the ice, and then they pull it out and clip the wings back on again, which is what they use to fly around. And the computer was powered by solar and wind. So, we had to set that up. And as a satellite came over, every day we were booming down information. And then it was just incredible. It was an amazing experience.
Absolutely incredible. We've got lots of comments saying, wow, what a CV at the moment. what a career so far. And it's not even, I don't even think you've probably peaked yet, have you?
No, probably not. I have to say there's been a bit of a lull while I was having kids, there was, it has been a funny career, because I think I had this like crazy peak in my 20s of like doing all this mad stuff, and and then had children, took about 5 or 6 years out of industry and raised my kids at home, and then I've kind of come back and starting to, get really back into it again and start making waves and disrupting stuff,
That's
kind of
what
as I like to do.
And that's what I want to get into today. So for the next sort of 45 minutes, I want to grasp as much knowledge from you as we possibly can for everybody, to share your insights, and so that we can add value to people, particularly because we're celebrating Earth Day today, and it's 50 years of Earth Day. And I think it's a really exciting time. What I'm going to do is, I'll just let people know what we're going to do is we're going to talk to you a little bit about the high level stuff. So how is Brexit affecting all of climate change? How are the UK taking on this challenge? How is COVID-19 affecting us and impacting climate change as well? So we're going to delve into that a little bit. Then we're going to talk a little bit about workplaces and how businesses can do a better job in the light of climate change. And then I want to delve into what people like you and me can do. What can we do at home to do a better job for ourselves, our families, and the planet we're on at the moment? So how does that sound?
Yeah, go for it. Let's
do
go.
It. And also, anybody watching, if you're watching on Instagram right now or you're watching on LinkedIn right now, please answer or ask your questions. We will delve into those questions as much as we can throughout this next 45-minute session, or maybe an hour. So please do ask your questions. I want to make sure you get the most value out of this as you possibly can. This is a rare opportunity to get one of the best environmental and sustainability experts live. So use it.
Go for it.
Use the time.
I'm quite nervous. So God knows what's going to come up. We'll see. Go on.
Nothing you haven't had before, Georgia. Don't you worry.
I'm sure. Go for it. Go on.
So, I guess Earth Day, 50 years of Earth Day, landing today. We're in a very sticky situation at the moment as we are in this pandemic of coronavirus and COVID-19. I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on the impact of coronavirus on the environment and climate change, and what just your general idea is of this going on at the moment.
Yeah, well, it's an incredible time, isn't it? I mean, who would have thought just how much change could have come about in just such a really short space of time? On the one hand, I find it incredibly encouraging. So, you know, I've worked for nearly 25 years in sustainability, and throughout that entire time, we've been told you can't change overnight. You know, you can't change industry overnight. You can't change government. You can't slow down the economy. You can't do any of these things. And so to suddenly, within the space of a couple of weeks, to have almost halted global economy, for everyone to be at home, for everything to have changed in such a seismic way, it kind of proves to us there is a great big red button that says stop, stop the world. You know, and that for me as an environmental campaigner, primarily as an environmental campaigner, you know, secondary as a sustainability consultant, but that to me is an incredible insight into the fact that major change is possible. And I also think it's incredibly heartening because there is in order to embrace the principles of sustainability and to really have the sorts of change happen that needs to happen to address certainly the climate emergency, the biodiversity emergency, people need to adopt more flexible thinking. And I think that this crisis has forced those who do not currently have any kind of, you know, flexible thinking most of the time to learn to adapt, to change the ways that they work. You know, you cannot stay the same as you are in this current situation. You've had to adapt to a new way. And so I think that has created some sort of elasticity in people's behavior, in their thinking, which I really hope we can carry forward to ensure that further change happens. You know, we can kind of ride this wave of change, and people might be a little bit more open to the idea of traveling less or the idea of consuming less. Mm-hmm. You know, of being a bit more mindful about their behaviors and what they're doing, what they're buying, that I really think is incredibly heartening. There is obviously another side to it, which concerns me. This is clearly lots of businesses are struggling to survive. Lots of people are struggling to survive. You know, it's a really catastrophic situation for society, mm-hmm. and for individuals, and also for lots and lots of businesses. And so I do fear that if we simply return to normal, then all of this potential that is around us for change will be lost, and we will simply go straight, you know, as soon as we're out of lockdown, we'll be out of the starting blocks going at 100 miles an hour back to business as usual. And particularly because businesses are struggling at the moment, I am concerned that the environmental and the social agenda will be put on the back burner, and the sorts of plans that people might have had to improve their corporate responsibility or their environmental practices will be, you know, put to next fiscal year, mm-hmm. instead of this year. So, you know, I think there's time will tell, but I really, really hope we can grasp this opportunity to make positive change.
I think that's probably one of the biggest issues for most businesses, or maybe just one of the biggest challenges, is how we balance that. You know, a business wants to grow, we want economic growth. How do we have that business and economic growth and align that with looking after the environment, making sure our strategy on environmental and sustainability factors is aligned well with that business strategy? How do we do that? Because I feel like in some instances, they kind of fight against each other.
Yeah, oh, yes, they do. They absolutely do fight against each other. You know, it's the core, isn't it? It's the core of sustainable business. We have, you know, the three pillars of sustainability are, and when we talk about sustainability as well, sustainability seems to have become a kind of proxy word for environmental issues. It's not. You know, sustainability simply means sustaining something indefinitely. Yeah. And so in order for a business to be truly sustainable, we need to consider not just money, because if we consider money and nothing else, then we get ourselves in a very sticky situation, which lots of businesses are currently in, which is that resources become scarcer, whether that's people, talent, whether it's environmental resources, materials. With climate change, we've got all kinds of issues around the world with problems with accessibility of resources, markets being disrupted. If you just focus on money, then, and to the detriment of all other things, then you are not going to be sustainable in the long term, because we can see the current global economy has created environmental catastrophe, which is not sustainable. The world simply cannot sustain business as usual. And that's why we're seeing these issues with climate change and biodiversity loss and sea acidification and all the things we read about in the newspapers. It's simply not sustainable, and there is no business on a dead planet. So, but then if you only pursue environmental goals, then you're not financially sustainable, so your business will not flourish. If you only exist to look after your people, and you're not financially sustainable, then you will not ultimately be doing any good. You'll be going bankrupt before you know it. So to have a successful business and a successful society, you have to consider all three of those things: the environment, people, and money. Now, traditionally, in a capitalist society, we have traditionally only thought about money, and hence we've got ourselves into this mess. And this is why I've kind of coined the term disruptive sustainability, because sustainable business has failed. It has failed. There's absolutely no other way of saying it, because if it had not failed, we wouldn't be facing the issues that we're facing today. We simply wouldn't. I mean, we've been talking about sustainability for decades. And I think for me as a sustainability professional, I've been doing this, like I say, for nearly 25 years. I've become very dispirited over the years and kind of become quite rebellious about it, actually. I'll talk about that another time. I am a part of Extinction Rebellion, which I'm very proud of. Because I see that radical change is required. And I think that has to come from the top. When we talk about businesses, there are lots of reasons why a business ought to consider more about environmental and social impact. It makes good business. And I think particularly now in this crisis, a lot of people will be asking questions about their employer. A lot of people have been very disillusioned about the way they've been treated by their employer. A lot of people, and I think when a business only thinks about money and doesn't take care of the people in its supply chain, the people it employs, the people in its communities, that veneer now has slipped. And I think a lot of people are now saying, my employer's treated me appallingly. This is not okay, and therefore that's a very clear indication that that business is not sustainable. So there's going to be some really interesting reckoning, I think, coming out of this. I can't even remember what the question was, sorry. I think that ultimately the answer is about leadership. That if you're going to really embrace sustainability principles, the people at the top of the business who are leading have got to believe that it's a worthwhile investment, and that this is something that is important, that they feel good about. They can go home at the end of the day, they can look their kids in the face and they can go, I'm doing a great thing. I love my business, I love what I'm doing, and I'm a force for good. That's kind of the most important thing, I think, is having great leadership.
I think absolutely. You absolutely answered that question. It was about understanding the balance between economic growth and, having a sustainable business. And I think it is just a balance, but we need to make sure that there is a balance and we're not taking one thing over the other. It's, ultimately we do want to look after our planet, and I guess that is our priority, but we also need to run businesses, have good economic growth, and have a good economy going, so that we have jobs to go to and work, and have a culture that we can live by and positively.
Absolutely. And I think profit is a good thing. That's, I think sometimes as an environmentalist, people think that profit is a bad thing, capitalism is a bad thing. No, it's not. Without a profitable business, then you're not doing good in the world. But I think there has to be a balance, and I think we're very much out of balance at the moment.
And so what are your thoughts then? There is the Paris Agreement, and recently the United States of America have withdrawn from the Paris Agreement. Can you tell the audience what that's all about? What is the Paris Agreement, first of all, and what the impacts are of the US leaving?
Yeah, I mean, catastrophic, really. Well, not catastrophic, that's probably too big a term for it. Things have a habit of coming good in the end, we hope. The Paris Agreement is an agreement that was made back in 2015, and it was made by 196, somebody I'm sure will correct me on social media, 196 countries. And it was an agreement by all nations, and actually I think might have been signed on Earth Day. I think, anyway. But it was an agreement made between nations to keep global carbon emissions at a level where we would not hit 2 degrees centigrade temperature rise. So that's like a global average temperature. And climate scientists agree that 2 degrees centigrade temperature rise is the point at which, we slide into some really catastrophic environmental consequences. And so these nations came together, made legally binding agreements to limit their carbon emissions. The UK has actually done very well on it, although there is an element of creative accounting, which we can talk about later. But the USA withdrawing is a really terrible loss to the international, mission to cut carbon emissions, because they are per capita, I think, if not the largest, one of the largest emitters. So China is the largest emitter of carbon dioxide in the world, but 60% of the world's population live in Asia. So, they are an incredibly populous country, and actually their per capita emissions are very low. USA is incredibly high, and also the contribution that USA has made to global carbon emissions over the decades has been huge. USA has contributed about 25% of all global CO2 emissions. And you just think about the amount of people who live in that country, that's an enormous contribution to CO2 emissions. So, we know it's an incredibly energy intensive lifestyle there, industry and so on. And so it really is a blow. And I think there was such an opportunity lost to demonstrate leadership. But one of the really positive things about USA politics, actually, is that because they have these really strong areas of innovation, like California is a real beacon of hope in the USA, and lots of organizations strive to meet Californian standards rather than US, national standards. So, yeah. Does that answer it?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, just from someone very basically understanding the Paris Agreement, and thank you for that kind of definition and giving us a bit more of a well-rounded view, it's kind of a frustrating thing that the US have withdrawn from it if they are such a big contributor to carbon dioxide. And, of course, they have money as well, so that I'm sure helps the agreement in that sense too. And I guess in that sense, I can't be the only one that's frustrated, and I bet a lot of other people are. How can you twist our thoughts and our mindset round to feeling less frustrated and more positive about things like Earth Day and things like the rest of the world are trying to achieve? Yeah,
I think you have to let go of that stuff. And, and I say this as an environmental campaigner, I have, as an activist, as a campaigner, I have had sleepless nights, and I'm not exaggerating when I say I have, had long, dark nights of the soul where I have just sat and cried and thought, oh my God, I'm not sure humans are worth saving. This is just awful, what we're doing to the planet. And just gone into real depths of despair around environmental issues. And then kind of bounced back, and I've now found a place where I feel empowered and positive because I'm taking action. And I think that's the same in so many areas of life, is that there can be a lot of fear, but actually fear generally is deflated with action and motivation and community. And I think it's really important to stop worrying about the future and to start thinking about, what is my contribution? What can I do? Because you can't control what other people are doing. I mean, God, if we could control what Donald Trump was doing, the world would be a very different place. But we can't. We can only look after our own backyard, and I think it's really important that if we care about these issues, that we take positivity from action and we take positivity from community and we reach out and find like-minded people, and we start our own mini missions.
Yeah.
Because we all have things that we care about. Like the things I'm really passionate about won't necessarily be the things that you're passionate about, but you can make a difference in your world. And I think that's really important to hold on to keep positivity, to look for the good news, to look for the good stories, and to do your bit.
Oh, hear. Absolutely. I think we have to start thinking more positively. And I think what you're doing, Georgia, with just the business that you run and helping other businesses create more sustainable programs and helping them that way certainly will drive this even further forward. So I think it's great that we've got you on the planet side for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I like that.
There's been a few comments on LinkedIn that I just want to delve into quickly. So Mariana on LinkedIn. Hi, Mariana. Nice to have you online. She's asking, is there a company nowadays that is an example of a sustainable business? Have you got an example of a good sustainable business right now?
Oh, yeah, loads. I mean, one of the really inspiring schemes that's around is B Corporation. So if nobody's heard of B Corporation, I think this is a really, really interesting one, particularly, you know, for those of us who are in corporates. If you Google B Corporation UK and look at those businesses, it's a really inspiring model. And companies that are within that are companies like Body Shop, Innocent Drinks, Patagonia, you know, big, generally consumer brands, but there are lots and lots of companies, non-consumer brands in there. They are fantastic because what they have done is create, to become a registered B Corporation, what you have to do is change your articles of association and change your legal structure so that everything within your business is not measured purely on financial metrics, but also on environmental and social metrics. And so you have to, your mission of your business has to be clearly stated. You have to incorporate in people's remuneration, in their performance targets, in your annual reporting and so on, some very clear targets for environmental and social benefit. And so it takes it away from just being, oh, here's a glossy sustainability report, and it becomes part of, you know, you don't just get bonuses for how many sales you bring in. You get bonuses for how much good you've done for the environment, you know, and how much social impact you've had. And it requires an organization to really think about what an impact they have on the community, on the world around them, and to bring that into their performance metrics. So making a decision, say if you work for a construction company and you make a decision that, okay, adds to profit, but you've had no end of complaints from neighbours and you've had some non-conformances on waste management, well, that's potentially a sackable offence, you know, and it's you wouldn't get your bonus. So it's very interesting because it makes it everybody's job. You know, it takes it away from, you know, we go to most companies I go to and say, you know, a random person on the floor plate, you know, what does your company do about sustainability? They would say, oh, you know, go and ask Bob. He's our head of sustainability, you know, I don't know. Or they might print something off the intranet. What this does is it makes it everyone's job. Like, I know what this company does about sustainability because my bonus is linked to it and my performance review is linked to it. And if I don't report on it, it's sackable, you know. So I like that model. And if you go on to B Corporation, you can see lots of companies that have signed up to that. And I think, you know, Patagonia gets lots of press for, they also release loads of great tools as well that other companies can use. Yeah, there are some really good companies around.
So there's lots of companies that I see, so and even people commenting now, so companies like Target and Dataflex, companies in the furniture construction industry who do flooring and manufacture products for the workplace. All of these companies are now stating that they are carbon neutral, they are striving for zero net positive impact on the environment. What does any of that mean, Georgia? I've got no idea. It sounds good, but I've got no idea if it actually is.
I know. Yes, it's an interesting kind of soup, isn't it? Of lots of different standards and claims. You know, I get asked this question a lot about, you know, what's the best standard, what's the best mark you can have, what should we do? And I think, what do I think? I think you have to apply some critical thinking to this. You know, it's really easy for organizations to make claims, and it's incredibly positive that being seen as being sustainable these days is worthy of putting in marketing, and you know, I welcome that, but I do think there has to be substance behind the claims, and I think there also has to be a fundamental desire within the business to, even if you're not perfect, to be on a journey and to be genuinely exploring these issues because you want to make a difference. And I think that's very different from having a glossy claim or a certification. So there are some fabulously sustainable businesses out there who don't have those certification tick boxes. And they struggle because specifiers, you know, want to be able to say, do you have, you know, whatever it may be, eco label or green gold or, you know, whatever it is, carbon neutral. There are things that you do need to be slightly suspicious about. You know, a carbon neutral claim, it's worth asking questions about, you know, how did you become carbon neutral? What have you assessed when you looked at carbon neutral? Because again, a carbon neutral claim is, you have to assess something. So what are you assessing? Are you assessing the manufacture? Are you assessing in use? Are you assessing end of life? So like, is your product non-recyclable, meaning that the thing just has to be incinerated or dumped at landfill, you know? So I think it's really important for specifiers, consumers of any kind, to educate themselves on what these things mean. And I'm afraid there's not really any shortcut to that, because a certification can be an incredibly powerful thing, but it doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. So it's really important to become an educated consumer and start to ask questions that go a little bit beyond the label, and start to understand the culture of the company and whether or not this really is just a little bit of marketing patter or whether it really is in the DNA of the organization.
I think it was a great question. It's come up a couple of times now, and Harsha has just posed the question again. Can you actually be 100% carbon neutral as a business?
You know, carbon neutral is one of those terms that you define when you do it. So the way that you can become carbon neutral is, you know, if you generate more renewable energy than you consume, and so you are a net producer of energy. As well, different carbon neutral schemes would decide what is a reasonable offset. So an offset simply means something that absorbs carbon dioxide, because all processes, no matter what you're doing, all processes have an equivalent carbon dioxide emission, you know, everything that takes energy. And so, yes, it is possible to be a carbon, even negative organization, but it's looking again, as I say, at how they've accounted for that and what exactly is included within that classification. You know, there's tree planting schemes have come under a lot of criticism recently. I think there are lots of brilliant, well-managed tree planting offset schemes, but there are also some awful ones that plant trees in totally unsustainable locations, and you know, they're hacked down after a couple of years and the whole thing's for nothing. So it's still, we're kind of still in our infancy with this, and I think that's why consumers have to be kind of educate themselves a bit.
I completely agree. I think we probably allow kind of the governments and our businesses to take a lot of flack when it comes to sustainability strategies and programs, and leave ourselves a bit uneducated in that. And actually we need to take the power back and educate ourselves so that we can question our businesses that we work for, question construction companies, the products that are being manufactured, that kind of thing. I think we have to, and I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. Yeah. As many of us have now transitioned to this working from home, I know not everybody has, but a large majority of us have started to now come work from home as a temporary measure over the next few weeks because of COVID-19. There seems to be really conflicting thoughts on how that's impacting the environment. So on one hand, we're all at home, we're not commuting every day, so there's less carbon emissions from lack of trains, planes, cars. But on the other hand, there's more food waste potentially. I guess, what's right, what's wrong? Is it good? Is it bad? What's happening? Tell me.
Again, I think because we're right in it at the moment, it's going to take a bit of time for this to kind of for us to look back and work out whether it was good or bad. But I do think that we have to be careful about thinking of environmental impacts only as being carbon emissions, because that's not the case. There has been an incredible benefit across the world in urban areas in air pollution. So massive reductions in air pollution. Huge, fascinating and hilarious stories across the internet of wildlife returning to urban areas as well, and reduction in roadkill for, and there's all sorts of stuff that you see. And those wonderful goats or sheep in Wales somewhere that just took to the streets and like ran wild. It was hilarious. But there's been a lot of, there's pros and cons. One of the stories I was reading yesterday was about the fact that because people now aren't traveling to these wildlife reserves in Africa, they're struggling to pay the rangers that protect the wildlife and protect the forests. And so, illegal logging and wildlife poaching and things like that are starting to return to these areas simply because they're not being patrolled as well. So me in North London, in my cozy little bubble here, it's fabulous. There's hardly any traffic. I can hear bird song. I've hardly seen a plane in the sky. It seems to be much more peaceful, and there seem to be a lot of environmental benefits. I do think that the thing about food waste is interesting because yes, we're all at home and we're eating, but I do think that food, I certainly feel in my household and amongst our neighbours on our WhatsApp group, that we're all kind of becoming much more frugal at home. We're kind of mending and making do, and because we don't want to go down the shops, we're kind of using that last rotten potato at the back of the fridge. And I dug out a bag of flour the other day that was way past its sell-by date, but it's flour. It's fine.
I know, living in this household, I live at home at the moment with Mum and Jeremy and the dog. Food does not get wasted in this house. It does not get wasted.
I've got two hungry kids back here. They eat their own body weight every single day. You've got to come up with something. So I think there are pros and cons, but there's definitely been some amazing environmental benefits that have been reported. I think we've probably all seen, fish and wildlife returning to the canals of Venice. And, and I think this is a really important thing for me going forward, is to see how authorities respond now to these changes, because a story came out yesterday that authorities in Milan, for example, have decided to increase the pedestrian zones. They've decided to make full traffic-free areas in the centre of Milan. And Milan, Milan, like us, European city, lots of winding streets, lots of traffic. It would be, that's incredible foresight to actually think about going forward, what are these changes that we can retain to make our cities better? Partly that's driven by the fact that they want some social distancing on the pavement, so they've expanded it. They've expanded bike lanes as well for that reason. But I think that we could, if our authorities have great foresight, really carry on these amazing benefits. I just really hope that we can. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fingers crossed. It keeps going. So, just to let you know, Instagram for some reason has kicked us off. But we are still live on LinkedIn, so that's okay. We'll keep going on LinkedIn, and we'll post on Instagram the full video afterwards so that people can watch it after. So sorry about that. Whoever was on Instagram, we're sorry, but we're still on LinkedIn if you want to carry on watching us. Georgia, with COVID-19, I know it's a big topic at the moment, and businesses eventually transitioning back to the workplace, back to the office. What are some of the things we can do to optimize buildings for virus reduction and that sort of thing?
Oh gosh, wow. So I do a lot of work on sustainability strategy with organizations and environmental consulting. And as part of sustainability strategy, I look a lot at corporate responsibility for people. And so well-being in buildings, well-being in communities. And one of there are so many things that organizations are traditionally do really badly. I am such a critic of the of the traditional office, of the traditional workplace. You know, it's like factory farming humans. You know, we stick people in these rows, in these horribly homogenous environments, generally with very poor air quality. The temperature is terrible. You know, it doesn't nourish people. You know, the environment does not nourish them. It simply treats them as if they are a unit of output, and so puts them into an environment where it's the whole office says to you, sit down, shut up, get on with your work, you know, and nothing else happens here. So I think that really needs to change, because a lot of people have said to me, you know, do you think the office is dead now because everyone's working from home? No, I really, really don't think the office is dead. You know, so many people are dying to get back to the office. You know, they don't have a great setup at home. They're struggling with Wi-Fi. I mean, that in itself, just going back to the previous question, is an interesting point, because, you know, we've all been at home and we're struggling with Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And, you know, the governments all over the world are investing in huge infrastructure projects, you know, and like HS2 and smart motorways and things. And we're all sitting at home trying to be more environmentally friendly, or just trying to isolate and communicate on the internet, but it can't handle it. And so, you know, there's a question around whether really we ought to be upgrading our broadband, you know, our internet bandwidth. So, but yes, getting back to the office question, is that we are social creatures, and there ought to be a place where we can all come together and do our work in a way which is productive, which is community focused, which is allows us to live as humans and to flourish in that environment. And I think that is going to become much more important now, because we've now had our eyes opened to this possibility of working from home. So the office now has to become a really attractive proposition. And I think that employers going forwards need to give much more attention to whether their office is somewhere that people can't wait to get to, or they can't wait to get away from. And equally, you know, again, I talk to a lot of organisations who are thinking of making a transition to becoming more flexible. So a lot of companies, probably the majority of companies in the UK, still do require people to be at their desk from whatever iteration of, you know, 9 to 5:30, at the office. And if they're not at their desk in the office, then they're considered to not be working. For some companies, that is highly appropriate, depending on what they do. But for many, many organisations, it's not necessary. But we have also seen that a great many people do not have the ability to work from home, or don't desire to work from home as well. So even if they can, they shouldn't be made to. And again, I think all of this comes down to humanising not only the office space, but humanising management. Because, you know, there's no substitute for knowing your staff, knowing what their home situation is, knowing how their brain works. You know, neurodiversity is a fabulous word that's sort of come up recently in workplace design. And I think it recognises the fact that we are all different. Now, I, myself, for example, I cannot work with any noise around me. I absolutely hate it. You know, I really struggle with any kind of noise distraction. My husband, on the other hand, cannot work without music playing, and really quite loud music as well. So we together are neurodiverse, you know, and need quite different environments in order to produce our best work. So yeah, air is one great example, much overlooked previously, but I think this is going to require people to take a good hard look at air quality in their offices. Now, we all know that air conditioning in offices gives people colds and flu and horrible, you know, spreads illness. This is requiring us to ask questions about that and see actually whether our indoor air environment is worse quality than outdoors, because our buildings should be safe havens. There should be a place where if you're requiring people to spend time in it, it is not a detriment to their health. And there's such incredible tech around at the moment, you know, really cheap, really good, reliable tech that monitors indoor air quality and tells you what needs addressing. So I don't think there's really much excuse for not taking these things seriously.
No, I agree. I even have a small air purifier in my home now, just because I was gifted it a few months ago, and actually it has really made a difference in our home.
Yeah.
So it works. And if it can make a difference here, then I think it should absolutely be used in workplaces. And I think that is starting to happen. And maybe in terms of hygiene, we're going to start to see much more information around hygiene in workplaces. I think that's a big thing. It's not just, yes, the building, we can put systems in place, air purification, plants, that sort of thing. But ultimately, we individuals need to take on some control and personal hygiene in that environment as well.
It's funny as well, I think that something that's really fascinated me recently is the idea of sterilizing environments. And I think this could be a slight knee-jerk reaction in response to COVID. There's been a lot of talk of sterilizing, bacteria killing surfaces. And of course, bacteria gels and antibacterial everything. But bacteria is not a bad thing. We're practically made of bacteria. Bacteria is a good thing. It keeps us alive. It keeps us healthy. And so the problem with killing off bacteria is you kind of leave a vacuum for pathogens to flourish, and I think actually what we need to do is work with Mother Nature and promote good bacteria, which actually you're then helping the good bacteria to control the bad bacteria. And stopping this whole, kills 99.9% of bacteria. That's not good. We shouldn't be promoting that thing. And I think there's I think that message will take time to come around, but that's one of the many, many things that I talk about with cleaning and FM teams, when I'm working in a well building, is about actually when you're spraying these bleaches and these toxic, these sprays around, they are triggers, they're asthma triggers, they're irritants, and they are actively harming the health of the people in those environments. They're not helping. And so using different cleaning products is just a kind of learning that we can take forward. It's very interesting.
Alex on LinkedIn actually has just suggested that it costs the NHS 16% of the full budget on asthma. So it's a big issue at the moment, and I think we need to come up with some innovative solutions to help us all.
Yeah, and I think air quality generally is, I'm absolutely fascinated by air quality, and it's the subject of one of my campaigning issues at the moment. There's a expansion plan to the Edmonton incinerator in North London, which emits pollutants over the whole of London, ultrafine particulates, and yet nobody knows about it, and this affects the health of Londoners. So whilst we have the ultra low emission zone in central London, we also have these waste incinerators which are pumping waste out, into the air that we breathe, and they're burning plastics and recyclable materials. So it's a real scandal that's happening right on our doorstep, and that's the sort of thing that I think can really help to empower and motivate people, is to understand what's going on in your local area and start to get active in those spheres and get passionate about something, and that I think can be a really cathartic, really helpful thing.
I'm so glad we ended on that point, because I want to delve into what can we as individuals actually do to help ourselves, because I think we put too much onus on big business, governments, all of that to fix this all for us. And yes, they should play a massive part in that, but at the end of the day, we're the humans, we're the people living on this planet, we need to play our part. And there's loads of conflicting thoughts, as we've already spoken about, on what's going to save our planet. And I think one of the things is everyone going vegan.
Yeah.
Is everybody going vegan really going to impact positively the climate?
Oh my God, yes. Yes. I mean, it's not going to happen, it's certainly not going to happen overnight, but changing your diet to become more plant-based is undoubtedly one of the biggest things that you can do to help the environment. It's just absolutely no question. Now, I say become more plant-based because when you say to people vegan, that scares a lot of people off, and there's a lot of vegan shaming, and I'm on a journey to become vegan. I'm in no way perfect. I'm vegetarian, and I only became vegetarian in about October last year. So, I've spent most of my life as being, completely eating practically anything that sits still for long enough. And, I think what happened for me was that if you haven't seen Cowspiracy, it's a fabulous documentary. It's really, really interesting. Also, Game Changers comes at it from a different angle. That's about sports and performance and health. Cowspiracy is about, it's not it's not a vegan film. It doesn't show animal cruelty or anything like that. It's about the environmental impact of animal agriculture, and it's really fascinating. But knowing what I know, I started to do some investigation, and I started to think, I am an activist, I'm a campaigner, I'm a sustainability consultant. There are some really powerful things that I can do. And, it got to a point where I was like, well, I can't really hide from this anymore. I know that this is a really significant thing. And so I stopped eating meat. Meat is undoubtedly, and dairy, they are incredibly polluting industries. They're also incredibly resource intensive industries. And so and they create, when you look into it, you can't really deny the facts, that it's so harmful to the environment that if you care about environmental issues, you really need to start cutting out meat and dairy from your diet. So I started to do it. Now, that's not necessarily right for everybody. I would encourage people to explore it, maybe even go 1 day a week meat-free, or 1 meal a day when you might not otherwise avoid meat, try to avoid it. It doesn't have to be extremes. And this is one of the things that I'm really careful about with people, is that everyone's on different stages in their journey. Going vegan, of course, there are environmental issues. There are also ethical issues, which again, I can't hide from. To me, that's really important. But if you are going to eat meat and dairy, then just, again, educate yourself, become a more responsible consumer. So make sure that you look into organic produce, buy local, start to look at reduced pesticides, reduced food miles, those sorts of things, buying from farmers markets and supporting local industry. Those kinds of things can make a real difference. And I think, when you start looking into these things, it breeds further changes. And it also, there's a ripple effect, because then people who come around to your house who eat with you, or your family, will start asking questions, and that is that sort of change in society that we really want to start moving forward, is this conversation, mindfulness, and this kind of movement to just being more aware of our impact and what we're doing.
What do you say to people though? I have friends who are actually farmers in New Zealand, Australia, the UK, and they farm meat, dairy, and that's their livelihoods. And so when you're saying everyone, well, not everyone, but you're encouraging people to maybe delve into some vegetarian diets and vegan diets, that affects people's livelihoods as well.
Of course it does. I have friends that work in the petrochemical industries. I have friends that work for oil companies. But society is changing, and so of course, there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers. I just think at the moment the winners and losers are not rightly distributed, and I think that yes, farmers do struggle. They really struggle, in lots of places to make ends meet. But I think there are fundamental changes that need to happen. There is a real lack of compassion in industrial farming. Those things have to change. There are huge pollution problems with industrial farming. That has to change. The planet cannot sustain food agriculture the way that it is. It simply can't. And so, it would be amazing to see those farmers evolve their practices like all other businesses need to evolve. We are all on this journey together. And if that means that their practices change for the better and they can have a truly sustainable farming practice where they're supplying local food needs instead of shipping all around the world, and creating lots of pollution, then I applaud that, and I think that that's part of a local economy. But we are all on this journey together, and we all need to think about what changes are possible within our industries. I think this conversation's kind of come full circle now about, we started off talking about sustainability, and if you're a great farmer doing great things, looking after the community and employing people, and you are socially responsible and you're looking after your animals in an ethical way, and all power to you, and I don't think that the requirement for meat and dairy products will vanish overnight. Of course it won't. There will always be a demand for it. And I hope that the ethical, sustainable suppliers are the ones that survive.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, I personally am not vegetarian, but we eat lots of vegetarian meals in our home. We definitely have 2 or 3 days that are purely vegetarian, but we still do eat meat. But we
Mm.
do try and source our meat and dairy from sustainable places. We shop at local farmers now, and so yeah, we're just trying to do it slowly and slowly, because I think that's all we can do. It's a very overwhelming situation for all of
Yeah,
us,
yeah.
and it sometimes can get so overwhelming that you think, well, bugger it, I'm just not going to do any of it.
I know, I know. And we all have to be careful with that, but I think it's choosing your battles, and we have to let go of the idea of perfection, because nobody is perfect in this journey. And also, again, at the beginning we talked about this flexible thinking, the idea that you're going to get it right is not the case. We really are still in the infancy of this. We do need to see wholesale changes to our economy, to the way that we live, to the way that industry works. We have to, if we're going to avert climate change or we're going to avert biological disasters. We simply have to find a way. But it's not going to happen overnight. You know, what I love about the coronavirus environment in terms of corporates is that it has shown us that change is possible. Large scale change is genuinely possible. And I think there is now less of an ability to companies to turn around and say, oh, we can't change overnight. No, we won't consider that. Oh, that's not reasonable. They have changed, and they've changed quickly. And so now the question is, what do they want to change into? And the fact that by not changing, that's a choice. We can throw that out to them and say, you are choosing to do what you're doing. You can change. So, what exactly, like I say, what do you want to change to become?
Thank you so much, Georgia. This has been amazing.
Thank you. It's been lovely talking to you, as always.
Absolutely brilliant. We have had so many comments on LinkedIn, so lots of people talking, absolutely agreeing with you when it comes to leading sustainable lives. And I mentioned a couple of questions already. We've had some questions. Let me just have a look before we go. Ed's asking, are passive sterilizing surfaces going to become more popular, such as copper, maybe?
I mean, I don't know. I think that sterilizing surfaces, to be honest, it's not something that I've massively looked into, so I can't comment as an authority on that. They might do. I suppose it depends what kind of claims they make. I don't think that, as I said before, I don't think sterilizing surfaces is necessarily a good thing. I think making sure that you operate good hygiene, making sure that people, I mean, there's something ridiculous, like 67% of people don't wash their hands after going to the toilet.
I mean, I can't deal with that.
We don't need sterilizing surfaces. We just need people to wash their damn hands, like, and I think, and that's a really interesting thing, because this coronavirus has kind of prompted us to think a little bit more about hand hygiene. But I don't know, they probably will become more popular, but I would question it, and I would question whether it's really necessary. You also have to look into the environmental impact of some of these things. Does these surface treatments make things unrecyclable? Is there an inherent environmental impact in them? And actually, are they genuinely better for people? I prefer probiotics and probiotic cleaners and things that actually introduce good bacteria as a solution, and better cleaning practices that don't put lots of airborne toxins into the environment. So I don't know is the answer, but I would apply some critical thinking to it.
I like it. Before we leave the audience, what might be your parting words to us?
Oh, wow.
What should we leave today with?
I would say, don't get overwhelmed with this. We're all on a journey, and I think it's really important that you find your reasons for wanting to live a more sustainable life, and don't worry about trying to do everything. Your thing might be looking after your local community, or your thing might be living a zero waste life or going vegan. What I would say is, try to think about your sphere of influence. So rather than just zeroing in on you in your immediate home or in your immediate community, think about yourself as a voter, as a consumer, as an advisor potentially, and all of those different ways in which you can have a positive impact on things that are bigger than you. So everywhere you buy from, do you ask them? Do you ask your supermarket what they're doing to reduce waste? Do you ask the brands that you love what they're doing about sustainability? Do you ever write to your MP? You know, because MPs do read their postbags. Do you ever write to them and ask them how they voted for, you know, climate-friendly policies? Those small actions can mount up to a huge amount, and they take a relatively small amount of time and energy. So I would really encourage you to make your voice heard and to ask questions of people, because you might be only one voice, but you might be the 20th voice that asks that question that week, and then people will start to see that this matters. So I hope that makes
Absolutely.
I hope that's a positive
brilliant.
finish.
That's what we wanted to finish on, a positive note. Don't let this be overwhelming to people, and just take it step by step. How can people connect with you, Georgia, following on from this session?
Okay, so I'm on LinkedIn, so please, here I am. I do a lot of my comms through LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram, although I'm a bit of an Insta baby. I don't really know a great deal about Instagram. I'm trying to learn, and Anne, who works with me, is trying to teach me. So I'm Georgia_element4 on Instagram. So that's primarily how you can contact me. And I'm a director of Element4, and so follow our business and see what we're up to.
How do we find your business? What is it?
So it's element hyphen and then the number 4.co.uk.
Brilliant. So I would suggest that everybody, if you enjoyed the content today, which I would assume that everyone did, I certainly did, please go and check out Element4 and Georgia's content and connect with her if you have any more questions. She absolutely is the voice of reason on this topic. And thank you. This has been wonderful.
Good. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I'm going to end the broadcast now, but you stay there for a few seconds after, and we'll have a quick debrief. Make sure that we're all okay after this. But thank you everybody who commented, was part of this discussion. I've been reading all of your comments. I've seen everybody comment. We'll be able to go live after, watch this broadcast afterwards anyway. It will be on LinkedIn for a while yet, and it's all been recorded, so we might start to edit it and chop off a few bits and post them in really important feeds. So thank you everybody. Have a lovely day and stay healthy and safe as well. Take care. Thanks, Georgia.
Bye.